I'm
You're a licensed marriage and family therapist, and you're touching on a number of things. But interestingly, a lot of what you had discussed in look like what you're interested in talking about is men's issues, at least men's perspectives, men's issues. Start off with your career. How did you get into what you're doing, and how did you end up where you are now on this path?
so I got into therapy from a personal journey. So I did not really know how to have relationships. I didn't know how to date, and so I just avoided doing that until I met my husband, and I realized I really wanted to have more skills to you know, do good at this. And so I went to therapy, and my therapist was a marriage and family therapist. So it kind of went from there that I realized, like, oh, you can actually learn these skills, and then you can keep learning, and then you can get your master's, and then you can get licensed, and then you can help others. So that's how I ended up here.
Awesome. What were the major skills that you were missing in the beginning of your relationship that you feel like a lot of people are also on that same path of not having in the first place?
So much. I, like a lot of people, did not grow up in a home with like ideal models of what a healthy relationship looked like. I didn't come from a broken home, but I did come from a home in which my parents um, just did not have the healthiest relationship. So I really didn't have a good model for myself. And so I didn't really know how to be a good partner. I mean, that was pretty much the basic thing. Like I knew how to exist in the world as an adult. I knew how to, be good to my coworkers and, have a job and, get through my day, communicate in those settings. But when it came to communicating about more vulnerable topics or being a little bit more open about what my needs were, communicating what I needed from a partner in a intimate relationship, I didn't know how to do that. And so that is something that I was like, well, there's got to be a way to figure this out. Um, and so, yeah. And so, yeah, I went and talked about, when I went to my therapist, I learned about attachment styles. I learned about the impact of trauma. I learned basic communication skills, self-regulation skills, all of the things that I work with couples now that lead to better communication between a couple and then healthier conflict. So,
Yeah, it's interesting to me. Like I've had this, I had a discussion probably a couple months ago with my father about having kids, raising kids, and he made a funny point to me. He said something like, "Well, you're just kind of figuring out as you go." Like to a certain extent,
mhm.
yes, but if we as a society, culture, species had to reinvent the wheel every single time, there's
100%.
no way we would have got to where we are, which means there's a massive gap in generational wisdom going on. And so I'm curious what your perspective is, even from the personal experience, but also from a broader experience, people you work with. Like, what was it that I have theories? I'm just curious what your thoughts. What was it in the fabric of culture and society that didn't allow these problems to be ramping up to the levels they are today that we've now lost?
And I write about this a little bit in my book. It was really the Industrial Revolution, right? Because before that, people lived in communities, people lived in farm communities. There was extended family members, right? That you lived. And America is a really unique story, right? Because a lot of people came here leaving all of that, right? If you go back to other cultures, Europe, I mean, literally almost any other culture, they have a history of, not nuclear families, but extended families, right? So grandparents, everybody grew up in the same village. Like that was very common. Everybody pitched out on the family farm. Even, you might have 15 brothers, but they all live, within a 20-mile radius. And so just the extended family was so common. And then actually America is a really interesting, like, I mean, it's a world experiment,
Yep.
basically, right? Where people just kind of came here on their own, leaving everything. So there was that, but also even like the Industrial Revolution of needing workers, needing fathers specifically to leave the family unit and go work somewhere else Because even in a mining community, let's say, where dads, they went to the mines, they came back home, right? And they were part of the community. And it's like the whole community rallied around this specific thing. Whereas when you go to, more industrial type work, a lot of people had to leave to go to where the plants were, right? And so that really changed the fabric of local communities in a really profound way.
What was your experience with your parents? Did they have a similar story of coming from a different country and having that societal disruption happen?
My parents so I'm biracial, bicultural, so they did come from two different cultures. But, on the surface, it was a very traditional model. Dad worked, mom stayed at home. But again, even with that, it becomes very siloed, right? Dad's job is to bring in the money. Mom's job is to take care of the home. And so again, with that traditional kind of setup, the relationship between the couple becomes very almost like it's very function based, right? It's like it doesn't almost matter that you don't have a good emotional connection. Like, are the kids alive? Is the rent paid? Okay, go to your corner. Right? And so that's the biggest difference in the modern relationship is people are not just marrying because they have to anymore. And so there's really the like, well, if you don't have to get married, why do you want to get married? And how do you make sure that whatever you want in that connection with that other person is not just a flash in the pan that disappears after the honeymoon stage, but that it's actually sustainable, right? So that's really kind of the frontier of modern relationships, is switching from the almost like transactional function-based, need-based relationship to the love connection, emotional connection. We actually enjoy each other's company and want to grow old together.
Yeah, I wonder within that, though, when we say it's no longer need-based, like there is like a personal theory, maybe I've heard somewhere before, it's like at the core of every want is like an underlying need. So you might say, like, well, I'd like to get married. Well, what for? Because I want companionship. What for? Because loneliness will kill me. So
Sure.
I need somebody. But people don't want to. People when they come out and say a need out loud, I think there's this sense of vulnerability, both men and women, where it's like I'm relinquishing some degree of power to somebody else, and I'm very afraid of doing that. And so we may frame it in a way such that it still maintains a certain degree of power within ourselves while also trying to get a need met by framing it as a want.
And that's a really interesting kind of semantic journey, right? Because at our core, yes, we are social creatures, right? We do need, this is why solitary confinement is, it's inhumane. Because at our core as humans, yes, we do need connection with other people. However, marriage as a societal construct, in order to be part of society, is no longer necessarily the. You're shaking your head.
I'm chewing, but I'm still listening. Yeah.
Okay, because that's really what I'm talking about. Of course, we all need community. Of course, we all need other people in order to, lead healthy, happy lives, fulfilling lives. But marriage as a specific way to become, to actually have a life that you can lead in a society, right? Because in the past, let's say a single woman, even up to a couple decades ago, couldn't open a bank account, couldn't buy land, couldn't do a lot of things in order to just be a part of society, right? And so that has changed.
Sorry. I've heard this point a lot. And I'm actually myself interested in getting into men's coaching. Trying to find a way to adapt the modern terminology behind long-term monogamous relationships and marriage and things like that. Because I think the concept around marriage, there are parts of it that are falling away, but I suspect there are parts of it that are essentially invaluable that people are like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That there is something to the idea of basically finding somebody that you can get along with pretty well for the companionship and whatnot, and basically saying, like, through thick or thin, as much as like the parts of me that are holding me back are going to fight, I'm going to try to keep myself in your life and vice versa to try to bring out the best version of myself. And something like marriage, it ends up being like this. I've heard this good term. It's like a crucible that ends up like the pressure and heat of it really turns the coal that you are into a diamond. But also, even an extended piece beyond that is the idea of like child rearing. That and on like a societal cultural level, that there's a lot of underlying biological forces that will push marriage apart in the direction of anarchic, crazy like societal disruptions that I think theories. I'm happy to have this discussion that marriage does a pretty good job of containing.
So, and this is where I think the shift is,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is marriage as a societal construct versus marriage as something that is inherently fulfilling to the two people that are in it, right?
So what do
Because
you? Yeah.
so what you're saying, I mean, basically, yeah, there were people that stayed married. Like my parents stayed married for the entire time their children were little. But
Mm-hmm.
once their children grew up and that function was fulfilled, then they ended up divorcing. And that's something that we're seeing a lot of now is
Yeah.
this rise in gray divorce, right? Where people that are put together because of the function-based nature of like, you get married, it's for raising kids, it's for providing a stable base. You know, there's an aspect to it that works well until it stops being fulfilling for the two people inside it. And so then when you get to that kind of point, like you said, it could be a crucible where people use marriage as a way to discover new things about themselves. But there are far too many people that simply are just existing in their marriages simply because they are married. Right. And so that's the thing that has shifted is like, you know, back in the day, divorce wasn't even a thing. You got married, you stayed married, whether or not you were fulfilled or happy, emotionally connected, who cared? You were married. Right. And sure, there were lots of people that suffered in silence. There were lots of people that also did have fulfilling marriages. But simply the structure of marriage in and of itself was a societal construct. It really didn't have, it wasn't based on what in the modern kind of ideal is the love marriage, right? Where the connection between the two individuals is paramount.
Yeah, it is. It is a weird time in history that weird by historical standards in that we've gotten to a point where we're pretty good at getting nature to stop killing us like en masse like think about like yeah like we're at a point of like ridiculous abundance that you
Yeah.
never need to leave your house to get everything you ever needed, so why would you want to like go through the burden of getting married and things like that? The point that I was making up earlier was this idea that like from what there's different perspectives around it, but for the most part, I think marriage did a pretty good job of, this is a theory I've heard, and I like it so far until I find better ones, that it did a pretty good job of stabilizing societies across time. Because historically, I have this like this running joke in my head of how like dating apps, I think dating apps are attempting to resurrect Genghis Khan in the idea of like one guy has access to way too many women. And the idea that what we're seeing today in certain parts of society, not everywhere, but certain parts, that if you kind of let it run amok, a top percentage of the guys in society will have a disproportionate access to a large number of women below. And the guys who are being disproportionately disregarded historically are the ones that in multiple societies throughout history would cause most of the trouble and the problems. They've heard this term like gerontocracies, where societies basically like cultures and tribes and things like that, where basically you weren't allowed to take a wife until you were like 30, 35 years old and you were like initiated into manhood. And throughout history, more often than not, the guys who were in like their mid-teens to 20, 25 years old were like at the peak of their testosterone and frustration. They're just like, I'm like the prime of my life and I have more testosterone than I know what to do with. Why is this old guy telling me what I should and shouldn't do? Who is he to say I can't pick up like a wife or a girlfriend? And then gang violence starts to form, and then like it starts to create like crime starts to elevate in certain areas. And that's the idea, is that marriage may have been one of these social constructs in history that contained certain biological forces to stabilize societies across time.
Totally. Yes. And so what I talk about in my book is really there are two different basic constructs of relationships. Right. And so this is what I see: the function-based marriage where we're fulfilling a function, whether it's giving a guy an outlet for his testosterone or giving him a purpose so he doesn't go out and start wars or cause a ruckus, right? Do something productive with your energy. Or a woman who wants to settle down and have babies and she needs a husband to do that, right? And so there's function-based relationships in which it is kind of transactional, right? And we still see that today. Young woman, rich man, there's maybe there's an emotional connection, but maybe it's, you have the resources that I want and we're existing in this marriage because there is a function transaction aspect to it. But we also see it on lots of different levels. I mean, I've seen this in my therapy office of people who, it's basically when the music stopped, right? It's musical chairs, music stopped. Okay. Right. They followed the script. This was the one I was dating when I graduated college. This was the one it was 3 years in. And, I figured we were getting pressured from our parents. And so there's the function-based marriage that's been around forever, which serves a purpose. Absolutely. It always has. Right. And yet the new marriage or the modern is the connection-based marriage, which is a relatively new thing, right? Because even back in the day, like when you had arranged marriages or you were getting married because, you needed an alliance with that tribe or whatever, again, it wasn't really about the connection of the two people within the marriage. If it happened, great. But that was not the primary, that was not at the center of marriage. That is at the center of marriage now. And that's what we're transitioning to. And that's why it is confusing, right? Because we're right in that kind of new frontier of the old paradigm worked for what it was, but there were lots of unhappy people in it, right? Now we're going to connection-based marriages, but people are still not very good at maintaining connection. People like that's what I was saying. Like we don't teach those skills right away in school, right? And so that's really where I'm seeing a lot of people struggling is how do we have honest, authentic, open connection that then also we have to continue to nurture throughout the life of the relationship.
Absolutely.
That's a completely different construct for marriage than the old way of, okay, you guys are a great match, go nuts. And then you keep it forever,
Yeah. And I think there's layers to this idea. Like there's a bit of a danger when you give people a comparatively easy way out in a marriage. Like it's like if you're connection based and you came to connection based and then your old traumas start working to the surface and the problems start to arise and the stress of the kids. And then I hear people say like, well, we just fell out of love. It's just like, what does that mean? That's not even just woke up one day and you're like, you know what? I'm done. It's like, it's chipping away gradually over a long period of time, but little things that are bothering you that you're not saying, like communication, open communication.
Totally. Yeah.
And how people are just not, like I said, educated and learning, like, what does it mean to be in a connection-based marriage?
100%. And this is exactly why so many people are struggling. It's because a connection-based marriage is at a totally different level of skill than a function-based marriage, right? Because a function-based marriage, you rely on the function to keep you together. You might not be happy, but whatever. You have kids to think about. You can talk about the kids. And there are so many couples that, like you said, even, and I write about this in my book, that because they don't have the skills to nurture long-term connection, they rely on that spark of the chemistry and the honeymoon phase. And they think that's connection, but then they wake up in 15 years and they realize they've ended up in a function-based marriage because the only connection they have to their spouse is we talk about the kids, we talk about logistics, we talk about your parents, we talk about your job, but we don't talk about our emotional connection because we haven't nurtured. Because and so that's also something I talk about in my book is, connection, deep emotional connection requires a certain level of intimacy. It requires a certain level of vulnerability. It requires a certain level of self-awareness. It requires a lot of those emotional skills, emotional intelligence that have to be cultivated. And that level of being married is so much higher than the bar for marriage before, which was, you're hot, I'm hot. Do you want to have kids? Sure. Will you stay home? Sure. Will you pay the bills? Yep. All right, let's go. And again, obviously there's lots more factors than that, but the bar for marriage is so much higher now. And I think a lot of people are struggling to to reach it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are struggling to recognize the internal pulls of so much of their biology, as so much of their, like I said, like micro traumas, macro traumas, whatever, past behaviors and events, feelings, and things like a good example, what simplest example is like the open door policy. We're thinking like, especially if you're a younger person now and you've been on dating apps for a while, and you meet somebody, you kind of like them, and then things go out, and the honeymoon phase kind of phases out, and you're like, well, it's the dating app, is people still talking to me? I don't have, like, I kind of want to, like, you don't realize you're just chasing the honeymoon phase over and over and over again, and it's not going to last forever. It's going to be problematic, and it's going to shoot you in the foot later. And you're kind of seeing it now with like the loneliness crisis going on in the world. And so this is an interesting tie-in to say that your focus is primarily on men and men's problems. So where do you see, what are the new skill sets that men have to pick up on that we weren't really bringing to the table before?
Yeah, so that's really the kind of prologue of my book is, for a long time, what made a man valuable in the marriage market was being a protector, being a provider, and being a procreator, right? So if you were physically strong, if you had money to pay the bills, and if you were virile, right? If you were fertile, you could give your wife a baby if she wanted, right? So protector, provider, procreator. And so in the modern relationship, what I'm seeing is how can we adapt those skills to be more applicable when, and again, this goes across so many different aspects so I'm just going to, our world has changed in a very short period of time, right? Not just the dating, but like you said, biology and evolution. So this is also why the stress is a problem, right? Because when we get a moment of stress, our bodies get flooded with cortisol, right? Which, is super adaptive when we're on the savannah and the stressor was a lion that we needed to run away from and climb a tree. It's not adaptive right now when we're sitting in traffic and we're just getting this dump of cortisol, right? Which is why stress is so damaging to our bodies, right? Because the previous outlets are no longer there. Right? I mean, you could, I guess, get out of your car in traffic and run around your car a couple times and get back in and let it out. But really, right? And so this is kind of the same thing. It's like these skills that made men valuable, like, for protecting. Yes, you needed the strongest guy because, you needed to know that he was going to protect you from the lions and tigers, and the other marauding hordes who would try to come and steal your farm and whatever. But what kind of protection do women want now? Right?
Multiple levels, I would argue, but we can keep talking. Sorry.
Okay. And attraction is different than that. That's a whole different layer.
Okay.
Right? But when it comes to protection, so what I see right now as a marriage therapist is the things that make marriages most susceptible to harm, right, is not someone's going to come and take your wife away, or there's going to be a wolf at the door. It is that the emotional connection is shattered. The sexual connection is unfulfilling. There are, things that come between a couple that don't get resolved. Right. And so protecting your marriage is more about those soft skills of, are you able to cultivate a relationship in which it is safe to talk about vulnerable topics? Can you protect your relationship from things that might threaten it, whether that's porn, whether that's alcoholism, whether that's workaholism, whether that's the erosion of your emotional connection? Those are the actual threats to the modern marriage, not so much, some other whatever, like lions. And then same thing with provision, right? So it was very simple, right? Could you bring home the bacon? Were you a good hunter, or did you have a good paycheck? And now, what is it like? What does it mean to provide in a relationship? Is it simply just a paycheck? I mean, sure, there are still women who are looking for that. But again, if you're looking for a connection-based marriage, is your wife going to see you as more than a paycheck? Absolutely. So what else can you provide? You can provide play. You can provide pleasure. You can provide, emotional connection. You can provide all of these other things, right? But those are a completely different set of skills. And same thing, procreator, right? Is it enough to just impregnate your partner? Or do most modern women want equal parents, right? They want an invested father, somebody who's, going to be around, who's going to take, an active role in parenting, which a lot of men in previous generations didn't do that. They didn't have to, right? Their role was procreator, right? Going to give you another baby if you want one. And I'm going to, and again, I'm not saying that there weren't involved fathers throughout history, but the bar for being a parent now, especially in a modern relationship, is a lot higher.
It's difficult too, because we mentioned earlier how people live in like tribes and communities and whatnot, in that like a common misconception that I see, and I don't have kids, but someday maybe, that it's not enough for two parents to raise one kid. Like you really do need like a group of people, and it's
Yeah.
becoming there's this weird interlocking in a social and cultural and economic context that it's like, especially in America, parts of America at least, depending on how you want to live, you need a 2-income household, which
Yeah.
means ideally you have people and friends nearby that can help you with your kids, like friends. It could be family, could be elders, could be cousins and whatnot. And if you don't have that, like the kids are suffering on some level,
Yeah.
and the fathers having to step in into new roles, or the mothers having to step into new roles and whatnot. It kind of detracts from, I guess, like a nice way to put this is like, it detracts from a guy's ability to lean into his masculine and a woman to lean into her feminine and vice versa. Or a guy leaning into like what it's there's more to the thought than that, but the idea being,
I would say, and that's something, again, like this is one of my favorite chapters in my book about
mm-hmm.
nurturing,
Yeah,
because being a father is inherently masculine. Like that
yeah.
is literally
Yeah.
core
Absolutely.
masculine, right? Being able, I mean, look at, you talk about Genghis Khan, like what he fathered, like what, 3% of the entire population of the world. So that is something else. Is like, yes, procreation is like an inherent masculine thing, but so is having a legacy, right? If you go back in history and you talk about the patriarchs, like there was a masculine presence in the home that was, again, it wasn't just, oh yeah, that's my dad and I see him, twice a month on the weekends. He comes to my games. But this was a man that you could go to for his wisdom, for his guidance. He was very present in the home. Sure, he might not have changed diapers, but the idea that a father is being a father is not a masculine role is like, that doesn't even, that doesn't even make any sense, right?
The idea there, I think I'm getting to, is like, from what I understand, and I've seen a lot of research and whatnot, like more, not even traditionally, almost like biologically, we'll say women, but I can really context in the feminine, is better equipped for, on average, dealing with like child rearing below a certain age. And then at some point, fathers kind of like step in more and more and more to kind of become like, I remember hearing this good quote. It was in a book. It was like, the mother strokes and the father pokes. And the idea is like, especially for young boys, a healthy male figure or masculine figure in their life is a demonstration of how to self-regulate emotionally.
100%.
And
Yeah.
how, especially in today's world, when it's like you said before, dad's got to go to the factory, dad's got to go to the industrial place, dad's got to go to the city to work.
Yeah.
And then you got all these guys who are going into adulthood going, I have no idea how to be in a relationship, and I'm terrified of this. And you're like, well, how the hell? Like, I understand one or two people once in a while, but when you see such a massive amount of men coming through the system, so to speak, you have to answer the question, like, what the hell happened? Like, where did this come?
Totally. And I see that honestly a lot with men whose fathers were actually present in the home, but not present. You know what I mean? Where they were there, but they weren't present. And that's really the thing, is like, yeah, sure, we can talk about single moms and single parent families, but I see this a lot with men who, their parents were there, their dads were there, but they weren't emotionally there. Right? They were physically present, but the message they would send to their sons is like, I don't have time for you. I'm exhausted. I just got home after a long work day. I just want to sit in front of my TV and drink my beer, and, please don't bother me.
Yep.
And I've heard that story so many times from men who were like, as a boy, if my dad was in the living room, like I knew just not to go in there. I had to like tiptoe behind him to go up the stairs, and like, only if he asked me about my game would I share with him. And that might be the only interaction I would ever have with him.
Yeah.
Hey, how was school? How was the game? Did you win? Yes. Oh, good. Or sucks. Right? Like, again, so I really, this is really where it's boys deserve better than that. Men deserve better than that, right? Our whole system deserves better than that. And also for those men, I've heard from those men too, because I've got men coming in their 70s, 80s, who are like, I want a relationship with my adult children now. Like maybe their wife has passed and they realize like their wife was the glue that was kind of holding everybody together. And then now that he's a widow and he's like, I don't really know how to cultivate a relationship with my children because I always left that to my wife, right? And so that's really, again, where it does a disservice to all sides of the equation to see men simply as financial providers and not integral to what it means to make a healthy marriage work, a healthy family work, and also just to, have a legacy of the masculine, right? Like fathers passing down those skills. And so that is something that I'm very passionate about. And that's why I do this work is, because the old way, like you said, like, sure, it worked in some ways, but it also did a lot of men a disservice, left a lot of families disconnected. And
when we say the old way, how far back could we talk?
I'm talking about just a couple generations, right?
Yeah, because my context of the people think 10 years is a long time. It's barely a blink of an eye in the context of human history. It's like not even like halfway down of a blink in human history. That it's interesting. It's like you go back far enough, and even in more tribal village township, there was still this massive interconnectedness. And I think within the fabric of those structures and societies was this framework of like, yes, like boys were around their fathers and girls were around their mothers. Maybe they were being, prepped and trained how to be a good husband, how to be a good wife. But even then, there was still so much like overlap in both directions.
So much.
And how like I think what we're seeing now is like fathers, men, people in general, people in America are being like overworked to the friggin' bone. And how when they come home, like they're completely tapped out because they have no way of replenishing their reserves. And then they come home and they're like, oh, sit in front of the TV, you'll feel better. Like drink a beer and pass out, you'll feel better. No, you won't. Like we're designed for connection, socializing, and even the people who are like, well, I'm introverted, I'm a bored of a, it's like you still like to talk to a person one-on-one. You still like having something. And I think what was interesting, I'm looking to get into now in the future, is something like men's groups. And I think we've lost a lot of that in like the original. I always say like the OG men's group was like the hunting party of the caveman. Like back then, it was they made a point talking about how I remember because it's good perspective. I was talking about this idea of how, say for example, you're out with the hunting party and you have like a bow and arrow and you're trying to shoot a deer and you're hoping it hits so you can get some food, bring it back home, and you miss. You missed a shot, deer run away. I'm frustrated. Oh my god, I screwed up. But generally, the guys around you are like, well, we know you caught a deer yesterday, so it's okay. And also, the time it takes you to go back home to then will help you to kind of digest the thoughts, calm down, relax, realize it's not that big of a deal. There's always tomorrow. It's okay. Nowadays, it's like you go to work, you're stressed out by your boss who your brain can't decipher between a bear and your boss or a lion and your boss. And then you come home, you haven't had enough time to de-stress and calm down. You're still holding on to all this tension. You're looking for an outlet in the form of something like TV or whatever it may be. And it's kind of not really the best thing for you. You don't have time to decompress, and you're bringing home that stress from work to your kids, to your wife, to your family, and then you're going back and just resetting the whole process again. And then within 5-10 years, divorce comes out of nowhere. Kids don't want to talk to you. You wonder what the hell happened. And it's just like the structure and fabric of things is just not conducive to our biology in a way.
Absolutely. And like you said, I mean, now too, it's your wife is also coming home stressed out from her job, and then the kids are, it's like, whose children are these? Oh my God, I mean, it's so stressful for the modern couple, especially with kids, it's like every single minute of every single day is you have to be on. Pretty much, right? You wake up, you get the kids ready for school, you maybe say goodbye to your partner, you rush out the door, you're like, there's so much to what makes the modern relation, or like in this society, just like being an adult, right? Like being an adult already is tough. And then adding being a parent, being a partner, like it's a lot. And so again, you're right. Like we were not made to do this alone. And I mean, you mentioned men's groups and hunting, 100%. My husband's actually out elk hunting with his brother right now.
Beautiful.
They're on a 10-day and they're actually bow hunting. And so again, like just this, like, yes. And it's interesting because that's one of the big divides I see when you talk about the difference in men and women is, women still get to have a lot of the community stuff, because women's community stuff, like if we go back to tribe stuff, it was very like women can sit around and, I don't know, drink wine together and, or
they were busy. They were definitely, yeah. I've heard this a lot with like women didn't get to work. Like, no, women were working. Like, if you look at maybe like the absolute top of the royalty, the aristocracy, the kings and the czars, like, yeah, maybe their wives weren't doing jack shit, but like 99.9% of the women at the bottom were like, we have a house, we have a farm, we have a community. That's a friggin' full-time job right there.
You can make bread from scratch. You have to make your clothes from scratch. You gotta, like, come on.
It just reminded me this. I think I've heard about this. It's like a YouTube channel where this person, like they'll go through the process of making things from scratch. Like, we're gonna make some butter today from absolute scratch, and people just watch it like, I'm exhausted watching this. How the hell did you do this? Like, just go to the supermarket, get a box, and come home. Done. Holy shit. But this is what the original jobs were, and this is what kind of kept people together for a sense of fulfillment and purpose and relationships, and like, I need you because you need me. And now society, like I said before, like, it's so abundant, and it's like, what's my purpose here? What do I do? Where do I fit in?
Which again, like if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of need, right, that's the opportunity to level up a little bit, right? But, again, you have to want to. Because you're right. Like when you're in survival mode, there is no like, who cares about emotional connection? Like we just need to eat today. Like, can we just, focus on the basics? But like exactly right is that as our society has become more abundant, as things have gotten easier, like you don't have to leave your couch, you can get everything sent to you. Once we've gotten to this place of, survival, basic survival, which again, let's, be honest, the economy is not great, but, but that's really what that next level is. Like, what does it mean to actually thrive? What does it mean to choose relationships that are actually fulfilling? What does it mean to invest fully into a relationship that can then lead you to that next level of your own self-growth, your own self-empowerment? And that's where it's so crucial to pick the right partner, right? And so that's also what I'm seeing of like, there is a small population of people that are like, wait a minute, I want to do this more intentionally. I want, like, if I pick a partner, I need to know that this is going to be the right person, because I don't want to go through a divorce. And that was part of my thing too. When I was doing my personal journey, I was like, I don't want to get divorced. Like that looks terrible and terribly inefficient. And like you said, like, oh, you just fall in love and figure it out. I was like, that sounds inefficient and dangerous and scary. And like, it's just a waste of time.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's really where I wanted to kind of, I mean, maybe this is just the efficiency nerd in me, but I was like, where's the blueprint? Where is the blueprint? I want to do it right. I want to do it one time. I want to do it well. I don't want to waste time in like, it just sounded terrible to me. I went to an all women's college and I was like, everyone's getting their heart broken all over the place. Like, is there not a better way? And so that's really why I wrote my book of like, kind of, again, sure, it's not one size fits all in any relationship, but what I wanted to do was distill the research that I found into what are the 6 pillars of what make a healthy relationship, right? And so this is not necessarily like what men have to do or what women have to do. The reason I wrote the book for men is simply because there aren't as many resources out there for men. Mm-hmm. And also, I believe that, men need like to feel like, okay, and you tell me, but women get spoken to a lot when it comes to like health and wellness and like, girl, you deserve better. You deserve to live your best life. Here are all the resources to help you. Men don't get that message, right? It's just do better. I don't know how, but figure it out. You're a guy, right? And so that's really what the imbalance that I was seeing. And so I wanted to write this book that, these are the 6 pillars of a healthy relationship. So I'm just kind of like strong is healthy, right? For any metric. But giving this book to men, because I'm like, you know what? I think I've seen in relationships, men feel very empowered when they're able to be the leaders, where they're able to say, like, I can create, this safe, and I can lead the emotional stability of the relationship as well. And that's something that I did want to speak to with this book. as well is, there is a level of the population that wants to do it well, wants to do it right, has no interest in wasting time because they understand how important being married is. And so they're wanting to do it intentionally. But, the resources out there are not great because this is a brand new frontier.
So without spoiling the book, what are like one or two of the pillars we can go through? Or if you want to go through all six, you're more than welcome to.
After all six. So the first thing is safety. Right? Women are hyper alert to safety needs. And so for a man, being able to provide what I break it down into the 4 elements of safety, being self-aware, being stable, having self-regulation skills, and the ability to self-express. All of these things bring safety in a relationship. After safety comes trust, being trustworthy. And then R is respect. Right? So safety, trust, and respect are like the first 3 core pillars of what a healthy relationship needs in order to survive. And then the ONG part is about keeping the relationship thriving. Right? So what I often say is when couples come to me in crisis, they're usually struggling with safety, trust, or respect. Right? They're disrespecting each other. They're lacking trust. They're being betrayed, or just those basic safety skills of they don't know how to have a disagreement without it becoming ugly conflict. But once they're settled, right? So I also see couples that come in and they're like, we're actually in a pretty great place. We just want to like nurture our emotional connection. We want to like keep this going. We want to take it to the next level. And so that's the ONG, which is openness, nurturing, and generosity. And these are the things that help a healthy, stable relationship thrive on an ongoing basis, right? So the openness, it's interesting what you said of like people are like, oh, we just grew apart. That's what I'm like, if you stay open and you have this open line of communication about how you're changing, because absolutely the person that you are when you're 30 is not going to be the person that you are when you're 60. So you have to stay open and update your partner on the changes so that you don't wake up one day and you're like, I don't recognize that person. So openness, and then nurturing, which again is, how do you nurture what you're building together? How do you nurture your legacy? How do you nurture each other so that you don't feel like you're sacrificing your life in order to be in a relationship? Because that's also what I see sometimes with people like, classic midlife crisis, right? Is like, I've sacrificed so much to be in this relationship. Now I deserve to be happy, right? And it's like, well, if you nurture each other throughout the relationship where you're like, I do want you to be your best self. Yeah, go hunting. Take those 10 days, because that helps you be your best self. Do it, right? And we nurture each other's dreams, then you don't feel like you're sacrificing to be in a relationship. If anything, it's helping you to reach the goals that you want, right? And then generosity, which is that kind of what I say is like the final kind of fairy dust of the relationship, which is when you're constantly looking out to see how you can make your partner's life a little bit better, right? And so that's learning about their love languages. That's learning about, just generosity is like that, treat other people the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated. Like taking that generous mindset of like, I might not understand, why you like flowers, but I just know you do. So here you go. Right.
I remember it was an interview, it was a podcast interview she was another therapist, and she was talking about this point about doing things for people in your life that they value, even if you don't value it yourself. And she said something like, I make a really, really good apple pie. It takes me like 3 hours of my time. And I fucking hate apple pie. But like my husband and kids goddamn love my apple pie. So like, yes, it's 2-3 hours of my life doing something I don't even want to eat. But the return on investment down the road of how happy they are, how much they appreciate me, and it puts a smile on their face and it brings us together for family time. Like that's where you look at it, like small price to pay for a big return later on that maybe you can't see in the moment because of how frustrated you are having to freaking cook this pie again or whatever it may be. But like you said, understanding like what is it that makes you like even like a big one for me is like love language is like physical touch. Like I remember like I think like a past girlfriend, it ended up breaking up recently, but like she just could, I guess in a way there was a simplicity to me, just like I think she kept thinking I can't give you what you need. And I was like, if you just tell me you love me, cuddle with me, and scratch my head, I will conquer the world for you. I swear to God. And but then there's like, but that's not what I think you need. Because I feel like you're supposed to need something else. Because based on things I've seen on social media or Facebook or these romance novels I'm reading or people I've heard my friends talk about. And it's just like, just hear what I'm saying. And a lot of people just have this projection of what they think the person might need based on what they might need or what somebody else they saw might need, or bringing a new skill set to the table, like having to learn a new, like maybe the person they're with fucking loves apple pies and they have no idea how to make apple pies. It's like, it would mean the world if you could just try to learn it.
100%.
And vice versa for guys, like, what can I do for my girlfriend or my wife? Like, it would mean the world if you just like sit down, shut up, and let me talk to you. Just learn to keep your mouth shut, whatever it may be. Like, I love it's the world. We watch Netflix together, like for one episode a night. And even if I know you want to play video games, you want to go hunting, we're like, it's just that. That's all I need.
Yeah. And that really is, I mean, that's honestly what I see as like the final element. And, that's why I ended my book with this, because, it doesn't replace the need for safety. It doesn't replace the need for trust, right? You can make somebody an apple pie, but if you succeed them, it's not going to go well, right? But it is that crucial, like the last little ingredient that makes the relationship feel great. It goes from good to great, right? And that's why I said what I said. I want to restate it. If like, there's the golden rule of like treat other people the way you want to be treated, right? Do unto others. But I like, and that's what I put in the book, is the platinum rule, which is treat other people the way they want to be treated, which is again, maybe different from yours, but taking that generous mindset of like, I don't get it, but I'm going to do it for you because you love it. It seems to make your day better, even though, I hate apple pie. Or for me, actually, it's I've learned how to cook elk and make a good burger. I don't even eat burgers. But that's the thing, right? It's like those little things